Of the Chinese leadership. And we have great sinologists sitting over here. They will tell you the kind of control the Chinese are trying to do in Tibet. Now, if the whole concept is of the moral transgression, so Chinese can initiate hostilities if they perceive there is a degree India is getting too big for its boots, or it could become a eventual challenger. Just take a scenario. Today, our GDP is $3 trillion. If Chinese was to double in next 10 years, we might have a 75% of that. We are touching $10 trillion. Now, where is this Indian $10 trillion GDP coming from? Which are our areas of strategic interest that are coming about? How is India trying to leverage those interests? So, if you start doing those calculations, you will come to a realization that the issue of moral transgression is not so simple. And then, of course, the whole issue of collusive support to its neighbors, that's something which is given and we take cognizance of. The Admiral talked about Myanmar, I talked about Sri Lanka, I talked about Nepal. Nepal is a new area of tensions is coming up, and the way Nepal is going under the Chinese commercial and infrastructural control, the way the developments are taking place in Nepal, and the way the Nepalese are lapping it up purely because of the simple fact they do not have the resources to deal with their own development, and the sheer requirement of developmental this thing is pushing them towards the Chinese. That's going to become a new area. And for example, if you're talking about the line up to Lumbini, the railway line up to Lumbini comes up, then you will have Chinese coming right up to your border in the Terai region. What will make the China's, why conflict with China? Fundamental point is, I talked about is, may perceive both force comparison and geostrategic trends either favorable or a strategic coercion or regional strategic balance emerging in India's favor. Here is the interesting point. See, my analysis of why Ladakh happened was, there is a growing concern of vulnerability of Tibetan plateau. Till now, the Chinese felt that Tibetan plateau was a safe launch pad for future operations against India if they need to be, like they did in 1962. Today, Tibetan plateau, the Chinese are vulnerable. Chinese are vulnerable because Daulata Beg Oldi airfield is 7 kilometers from the line of actual control. And when a plane is landing in Daulata Beg Oldi, it is having a good survey of the entire Tibetan plateau. Number two, if India develops infrastructure, this whole concept of border development, border defense cooperation agreement, BGCA, is based on preventing Indian infrastructure and re-inviting the 20-kilometer demilitarized zone concept, which was pushed forward in November 1960 by Zhou Enlai. They have never given that up as a concept. So the fundamental point is that if India develops infrastructure to launch mechanized as well as fair amount of large-scale, rapid reaction-oriented forces backed up by space, cruise missile and other capabilities, Chinese suddenly become vulnerable in Tibet. A new front of the potential which the Chinese calculus has never taken into account opens up. Therefore, the period from now till 2020-2025 is an area of great strategic instability vis-a-vis the Chinese mind is concerned in terms of Indian capacities. Unfortunately, we are not giving it the kind of attention that it requires. Added to that is the whole concept of the Kashgar corridor. The Kashgar corridor, what we call the Karakoram highway linking to Gwadar, we call it a Kashgar corridor. The Kashgar corridor is new area of the Chinese. There are reports of Chinese having signed with Sharif an agreement of $30 billion to build a tunnel. Huge tunnel. Now, we know half of it is posturing, but the fact of the matter is that there is a huge Chinese investment coming up in Gilgit-Baltistan, the upgradation of Karakoram highway, the upgradation of Gwadar. The whole concept is to create this area into a new zone of what I call a strategic land bridge to link up the faraway areas of Xinjiang as well as Tibet to ensure their economic development and extended political control as part of the Look West policy. So this is an issue that we need to. There is also this Chinese penchant against surprise, and which might push them to take launch first strike. They are very there is a certain degree of miscalculated behavior on the Chinese leadership. It is not to be taken lightly. If he starts feeling in his mind he is vulnerable, he will react. And that vulnerability of reaction is not an issue which is logical, which is constrained, which is believable, but in his mind, if he starts believing it, then it becomes an issue which is concerned. Just last one. Another important point is, in any conflict scenario, China will try and posit India as an aggressor, as its own actions as self-defense. It also will look upon the concept of psychological and moral intervention for his requirement to intervene. So, if you were to give him half a chance and he believes that he is vulnerable, then he can use that half a chance for psychological and moral intervention. What I have tried to show over here is, in terms of dealing with the Chinese challenge, what India needs to do is to reduce the gap of conventional asymmetry more in qualitative and less in quantitative terms. We need to develop enhanced deep strike capabilities based on our advanced ISR system and akin to an area anti-access and area denial strategies which the Chinese have got. We have to develop enhanced integrated C4IS architecture and conventional and strategic missile capabilities. The whole fundamental point to deal with the Chinese is that India should send a strong message, and this is a game of messages, a game of brinkmanship, that we have the capacity, we have the capabilities to pick you up when you are trying to change the postures in Tibet. We have the capability to hit you where it will hurt you, and there will be a cost of intervention, and the cost of intervention will be so high that you will not be able to bear it. Thank you very much.
Arun, thank you very much for that very comprehensive coverage of the continental strategy and how it relates to India. And ladies and gentlemen, we have about 10 minutes for question answers. If there are any, kindly seek. Yes, please.
Hello, sir. My name is Tenzin Harden from JNU. My question is directed to K.R. Menon. My question is it possible in a country like China to have political reform without challenging the legitimacy of communist rule over its people? Thank you.
We'll take a basket of 3-4 questions and then take them together. Well, yeah.
If I could just extend this discussion on the maritime versus continental strategy, and this is really to both the speakers. Allow me to commend you for 2 very comprehensive and I think insightful presentations. But to extend this in terms of what does it mean for India's policy makers? What are the historical lessons that one could possibly glean that when we look at the last 100 years in terms of ideology and how strategic cultures have evolved, to the extent that we can look at China today as representing an authoritarian communist power, which the primary objective is to ensure the primacy of the party. And we have the experience of the Soviet Union in the Cold War. What is the interface between the liberal democratic capital order, which you could say loosely represented what Britain and America represented, the Western liberal order, and the experience of the Cold War? with globalization and the fact that 2013 and 2014 is not going to be 1914, which is the 100 years of World War I, what can we infer? How are they likely to evolve now that you have outlined both the continental compulsion as also the maritime imperative? So I thought if I could request both speakers to perhaps apply their mind and give us some sense of really extrapolating and put your head on the block as to which way will they go.
Thank you, Professor Chari. Then we'll take these three sets of questions together.
A very short question for Arun Sehgal. You spoke about the Chinese, believing in something that you call the arrogance of Indian thinking. Now, could you tell us, on what basis do the Chinese believe that there is some arrogance in Indian thinking? Because so far as I know, officially, there is extreme caution in official India speaking about China.
Thanks very much.
I think it's a very short question, but it requires a long answer. So far, in the collapse of the Soviet Union and the East European models, it has been found that the only reform that is possible is by the collapse of the Communist Party. It requires the Communist Party to collapse before political reform is possible. But the Chinese have noted that example also. Just like we've watched that example, the Chinese have also watched that example. And that is one thing that they are determined to prevent. They would like to see reform come in and yet preserve the centrality of the Communist Party. Is it possible for them to do this? This is a game in which you can all participate. I think it's not possible. I think it is not possible because they are apart from the world revolution, they are following the Leninist model in all other ways, in the sense that the army belongs to the party. You cannot hold on to that tight Leninist control and yet believe that political reform is going to come in through normal channels. What they are trying to do is to make sure that complaints against the Communist Party are reduced by trying to stop corruption in the Communist Party. But there are statistics available that among the list of millionaires and billionaires, the majority are descendants of members of the Communist Party. So whether this is going to be possible or not is going to be very interesting to see. But I have my feelings that genuine reform in China cannot come without the centrality of the Communist Party being taken away from as a political actor. I don't think that is possible. As far as Uday's question is concerned, this is what I said, that the Chinese, what keeps the Chinese leaders awake at night? I think they are aware that they are riding a tiger. They can't get off. Of course, it would be possible. At one stage, there was this red group and blue group, that is the Shanghai development model and the central model, which is by and large the kind of debate that is going on in India between Jagdish Bhagwati and Amartya Sen. That is growth first, followed by trickle down, or do we go in for socialism and then that will make the people arise? Because the argument in China is coming in from the fact that the disparity in China is huge. that if you take the literature on the number of millionaires per percentage of the people, China has the largest number of billionaires. There's no question. But at one stage, this argument that was going on as to between the central group in Beijing and the coastal group may have led to a two-party system. It could have, theoretically, it could have led to a two-party system, a multi-party system. But they have squashed that. The new leaders, that is Hu Jintao and Xi Jinping and all that, have moved away from that model. And I don't think the Chinese really have an answer to this question. If they have an answer, I'm afraid it hasn't come out in any of the published literature as to what kind of model that they will eventually go for as far as the political system is concerned. As far as the continental maritime divide is concerned, I'm sure that they are debating it, and that for every advancement made in the maritime arena, they also make a simultaneous advancement in the continental arena. I mean, Ukraine is the latest example of how far west that they've gone. But there is little doubt in my mind that the great untapped resources of the world today are in Africa. That is not going to change. Geology is not going to change. And as far as if China genuinely believes that 8% growth is central not to the growth of China but to the survival of the Communist Party, then they have to go for the resources where they are, and therefore they will have to come into the Indian Ocean as a matter of course. But when this will occur, I don't know. But a lot of us would like to study that route because that provides opportunities for India, because they happen to pass by India, and that provides an opportunity.
Taking Uday's question first, you see, my perception is China continues to be what I call a geostrategically restrained power. It faces a huge challenge. By and large, as far as its continental strategy is concerned, it has got a reasonable continental strategy, but to deal with only medium power threats. Now, if that medium power threats transgresses into a much larger threat, like I was trying to explain to you, the Tibetan plateaus and things like that, certainly becomes vulnerable to an inimical player. As also the fact that Xinjiang and that flank also starts unfolding. So he has a problem of dealing with it. So he cannot take his eyes off the continental construct for next 10 to 15 years. I will put it down to 2030, 2040 is the time he'll continue to be biased about that. But simultaneously, like the Admiral talked about, the fact is that he is to look at resources and look at capacities. There also he is restrained, because he is restrained by the first island chain, he is restrained by the second island chain, and the ring around by the Americans is increasing. Despite the editorials in the Indian press right now, the fundamental point is that the new airfield has come up in Philippines. The fundamental point is the Marines are setting up another base over there. So the question at the end of the day for the Chinese is, how does they move forward? They can take two small little islands in the South China Sea and be happy about it, but fundamentally he is geostrategically distant. How does he exercise his power? Second, where are his allies? Americans had a full construct of NATO to support American forward deployments. It had a whole construct in the Asia Pacific which supported his Australia and his post-war Japan and Korea. Where are those powers available to China to project power? Where are those facilities available to China? Seychelles or a Hambantota do not make for power projection. Neither does the Gwadar make for power projection. So essentially speaking, next 10 to 15 years or 20 years is going to be a period in which Chinese will consolidate power. It'll try and see the structure, how they emerge. Chinese may even give up the propensity of trying to be a global player. They like to be a bigger regional player or an Asian player of consequence rather than a global player. Because the way power is currently configured, I'm afraid Chinese do not have the capacities and the capabilities in the couple of years to come. Yes, they pose a direct threat to India. We have to be concerned about it. But as far as a larger geostrategic role, I'm afraid that's not the point. Answering the second question of arrogance, the literature of the war up to 1962 will tell you how the internal discourse in China, Zhou Enlai always looked at Nehru as an arrogant man, a man whom he could not trust. If you were to see the statements which are coming out after the launching of this Vikrant or Agni 5 test, go and see the Global Times editorial. Yeah, you know, what is their perception of arrogance? The perception of arrogance is not that you are talking down at the Chinese and trying to show them down, etc. No, you are taking steps which is changing the power equilibrium. If you are changing those steps that shift the power equilibrium, then the only way he responds is by saying you are being arrogant. You are being arrogant because you have developed an Agni 5 missile which can hit the Han China, and suddenly if you say, hey, you are not supposed to do that, and then you have Avinash Chandra coming out with a statement, he says we are going to develop a 3 warhead Agni 5 which was a MOV, this thing, and then you say, I have an electronic bomb also. So he says, hey, you're nowhere near any of this, but you are trying to tell me to feel scared. What are you trying to do to me? So, you know, in his perceptual mind, and I commend you to see the kind of literature from India which the Chinese see. They don't look at our political statement. The young analysts in Chinese don't really look at they look at our technological and economic indicators. They look at them very, very closely. Something unfortunately we don't do that closely, but they look at them very, very closely. They try to make sense out of those issues rather than and this is where the whole concept of arrogance comes in. Hey, this guy, he's nobody. I discounted him till yesterday. Now he's posing a challenge to me. That's arrogance.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we seem to be standing between you and the lunch, and therefore I think we should conclude the session somewhat rapidly. One or two brief remarks. There used to be an expression called Chinese copy in 1950s, which spoke disparagingly of a copy made by the Chinese, which was perhaps much cheaper, but much less efficient, etc. But they have, I think, fine-tuned this expression into making Chinese copies which are much cheaper, yes, equally efficient, if not a shade more. So much so that they have changed the definition of communism itself. Today's communist China, even though Admiral Menon did mention that they have not departed very much from Lenin, but the fact of the matter is that would Lenin have recognized China today as a communist country led by a communist party? I'm really not quite sure. And if therefore if they can change definitions fundamentally, the definition of continental strategy, definitions of maritime strategy, deployment of aircraft carrier, etc., are all poised for changes. And therefore to that extent, the Western-led discourse or definitions or the parameters which we have been quite used to and we have sort of understood that quite easily now may be due for change. To that extent, we might like to watch this space. Chinese dragon has been recognized as a symbol of power, strength and good luck. But we are now seeing Chinese lion coming up. Not many people speak of the Chinese lion, but fact of the matter is, just to recount very briefly one, 2007 I had led NDC delegation to China, and we called on Deputy CGS of PLA, and he gave a gift, I exchanged something and we came back. I didn't open it there and take a look. I did that much later, and it was a lion standing on all fours. And I asked the liaison officer, who was a senior colonel of PLA, a PhD scholar of 20 years in NDU, and I asked him, what does this symbolize? I should have thought you would have presented a dragon. He said, no, this is lion. So I said, okay, very good to see this lion smiling. He said, no, lion is not smiling, because I could not make out, I thought it was a smile. He said, the lion is angry. So I said, oh, I see. Angry at whom and for what? He paused, he probably had not thought of that question in his briefing, so he said, well, lions are always angry. So I said, not really. You could come to my country and go to Gir forest. We have lions which would be almost smiling at you. They don't get angry. With this, I think we'll conclude the session. We would proceed for lunch. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Till 1:30. So we have only half an hour.
Thank you, everybody, for coming back and cutting short your lunch break. Just to introduce Ambassador Stobdan, who will chair this coming session. He's a distinguished academician who went on to become a diplomat. He's also an author and a national security expert, and he's a specialist on Asian affairs, covering China, Central Asia, and Inner Asia, including Xinjiang, Tibet, Myanmar, and the Himalayan region. And as a diplomat, he served in Central Asia twice as director at the Embassy of India, Almaty, and ambassador in Bishkek. He's also served as joint director in the Indian National Security Council and is founding president of the Ladakh International Center at Leh. So I request him to chair the next session, please.
Thank you, Madam, for giving me this opportunity. I think the people are still coming in. Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting session. I'm sure you had a very fruitful discussion in the morning, but it's the continuation of the same theme, except that this time we're going to discuss China's strategy towards South Asia. Now, in the overall context, China's assertiveness in Asia, I have personally watched very carefully in some regions how Chinese policy of regional power play is so effective that they theoretically apply in the same format all over around what they call the greater periphery, basically to emerge as China as a independent great power. Now this theory is Chinese on foreign policy doctrine that has been applied all around Asia, and I think the South Asia has been a bit complicated for China as compared to other regions, and it's not been so easy like they have succeeded in other parts of Asia. Now to discuss this, we have a very strong panelist. Both are stalwarts in their own way on China studies. So first is Mr. D.S. Rajan. All of you know about him. He is the former director in the Government of India and is currently director of Chennai Center for China Studies. He worked for about 20 years under the Ministry of External Affairs with senior level postings in Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Beijing. I've been reading his article on a daily basis, I think in the website. He served with distinction and was awarded the Prime Minister medals. Since retirement, he served in several central establishments dealing with sensitive policy issues, and later as a senior analyst in the ORF in New Delhi. He is a member of China Studies Core Group, ICWA, a visiting faculty in several institutions in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra, and the National Institute of Advanced Studies in Bangalore, and also Asian College of Journalism in Chennai. He is a frequent lecturer at the National International Seminar and editor of 6 books on China. I'm sure all of you may have read, it's very interesting books that is written in the last 10 years that I have come across. His articles appear on several national international websites, in journals and books. The Rise of China, Implication for India, edited by Professor Harsh Pant, Cambridge University, Indian National Security Annual Review, and Political and Security Dynamics in South and Southeast Asia, in Singapore. So I'll request him to make his presentation first.
Thank you, Ambassador Stobdan, for your very generous remarks about me. And at the outset, I would like to give my special thanks to M.L.Sondhi Institute for Asia Pacific Affairs and the Tibetan Parliamentary Policy and Research Center for inviting me from Chennai to give a talk at today's function. I'm really grateful, and I'm really feel honored to be here and tell you about what I feel about the subject which has been given to me. I've been asked to cover China's South Asia strategy with particular reference to China-Pakistan ties. I personally believe that this subject, before we move into the subject per se, we must understand what is China's grand strategy, about which the speakers in the previous session they covered in detail about China's grand strategy. Without understanding that, we cannot fully comprehend the significance of their area strategy. For example, South Asia strategy, Southeast Asia, and various things. So it's all integrated. So, ladies and gentlemen, in a very brief manner, I will flag what it means. What China, what is the goal of China, long-term goal of China? All of you know, I don't have to tell you, the domestic policy and the domestic policy goals and the foreign policy objectives are always linked in China. From the very beginning, when Mao was there, he wanted to consolidate the new China. Correspondingly, he followed a foreign policy which is known as leaning to the one side, that is seeking dependence on the socialist allies to protect the communist regime there. Deng Xiaoping, in the post-70s period, his domestic strategy is known as socialism with Chinese characteristics. I don't have to explain all these things to his knowledgeable audience, what it means. Correspondingly, Deng Xiaoping introduced a foreign policy which is known as open door foreign policy. See the connection. We cannot take foreign policy in isolation. That's what my stress on that. Successors of Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and Xi Jinping, they have kept the basic elements of the foreign policy vision, but with some kind of a fine-tuning. Jiang Zemin said 3 represents, as far as the, throwing the party membership open to even to the capitalists and other things, and he defined 3 major tasks of modernization, national reunification, and safeguarding world peace. I'm quoting their terminology. But the foreign policy which Jiang Zemin introduced is known as independent foreign policy of peace. It means a foreign policy which is independent, which doesn't depend on any alliance or whatever it is. Hu Jintao, domestically, he shifted the economic focus from GDP-centric to balanced development. Correspondingly, he developed a foreign policy concept which is called harmonious world. Which is sort of, see, what I wanted to say is the Chinese always think what kind of foreign policy framework we should have in order to achieve the domestic goals. That is the intention of them, and that you see the continuity from Mao days to the latest Xi Jinping era. Xi Jinping concept maintained the basic elements. He called his concept as a Chinese dream, the Chinese dream. which he called as great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, to use their own language. In other words, China want to recover the glories of the past under that Chinese dream. That is a dream. Recover the glories of the past and make China a very strong country through development. That is, Xi Jinping has said. And for this, he has spelled out two goals which are called double 100 goals, double centenary targets, It's very important, because unless you understand this double centenary targets, the relevance of the foreign policy, of course, will be losing sight of that one. In 2020, China wants to become a moderately prosperous society, to use again borrowing the terminology from what they say. That means quite a bit of advanced nation. GDP will be quadruplicated when compared to 2000, and per capita income will sizably go up. That is the first stage. In 2050, the second stage, China will become, that is in the vision, it has to become a socialist, strong, modern country with per capita of rupees, the US dollar 40,000. Now, naturally, Xi Jinping has also to select a corresponding foreign policy. You know what he did? He is talking about a new type of international relations and a new type of great power relations. These are all nothing new. These are the same concept, but he has given the new name. What do these two terms signify? Xi Jinping says there cannot be a conflict in international relations, but each country has to give respect to the core concerns of the other country. Everybody should take care of the core interests of the other country. Particularly with the United States, when Xi Jinping went to the USA very recently, he met President Obama. When he talked about this concept, enough publicity is being given to this great power relationship concept. What is the idea, particularly with regard to the USA? China wanted to soften the impact of the US rebalancing strategy in Asia Pacific, but at the same time, without making any delusion to its established principle of not sacrificing its core interests. So a core interest based foreign policy is being continued under the Xi Jinping regime, and under which there are tendencies on behalf for the regime to become soft in some areas, but to become hard in other areas. For example, in maritime disputes, they are very strong. In some of the other disputes, they are not that much strong. For example, India-China border, it's being kept under a kind of under control within limits. It's not being described as a core interest yet, and so this is very important thing. As in the morning, Mr. Jaidev Ranade was pointing out, the Tang's principle of keeping a low profile has been given up. An evidence is the speech given by the Chinese delegate in the Munich Security Conference in 2013, in which it has been said that China will shoulder international responsibilities in commensuration with its position and development capability. That shows China will play its role. It will not lie low. This is a very important point. Okay, now I come to China's South Asia strategy. Now we have to consider China's South Asia strategy in relation to their grand vision, double centenary targets, etc., etc. One of the a precondition for China's development is there should be peaceful and stable international and neighboring environment. This is a precondition. Considering this precondition, China's South Asia strategy logically should be to have peace in the neighborhood. And I think that's what they're doing it. And the entire South Asia strategy is depending on this vision, this basic principle, because the basic principle cannot be given up. So they will adhere to. But the point is, while they say there will be peaceful environment, neighborhood, and we need for China's development interest, we need that, etc. China is also not preparing to compromise on any issue on national sovereignty. And here the contradiction lies. China says both are pillars of the Chinese foreign policy. That means it's assertiveness as well as win-win relationship. But for outsiders, the contradiction is very easily, you can recognize the contradiction. What is happening in East Asia, all of you can see. Because of the, the two pillars which they say it's not contradictory to each other, it's creating some kind of conflict in East Asia, particularly on territorial, this thing. But when you come to South Asia, there are some specific elements of China's strategy which is natural depending on the area is concerned. On Southeast Asia, the China's strategy is quite different. In South Asian conditions are different, so China is following kind of a South Asian strategy. Now these elements of the South Asian strategy, the contours were visible since the end 70s. Since the end 70s, China has started following a balanced, recalibrating China's attitude towards South Asia. They call it as a balanced South Asia policy. I could see the terms about 2 or 3 years back, frequent references to South Asia policy in a balanced way, to be implemented in a balanced way. There are various evidences for that. What is South Asia? After all, it is India-Pakistan relation. On these two areas, China has started showing some kind of a balance. First instance is, we have seen that China has started dropping references to the terminologies like India-occupied Kashmir and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Now, from the end of 70s, what we see is India-controlled Kashmir and Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. It is some kind of a signal they are giving that some recalibration is going on, because Kashmir issue is the bone of contention between India and China. In 1996, Jiang Zemin went to Pakistan Senate and he told the Pakistani side in Pakistan that you have to talk to India to solve the Kashmir dispute. Hold a bilateral dialogue. Earlier they didn't say that. So this means, and simultaneously the Chinese periodicals, they have told that we are not taking sides on the Kashmir dispute. Authoritative media, it was almost reflection of the Chinese official policy. Thirdly, on Kargil conflict, China was neutral. China did not take sides. It was a clear indication. China is also not referring to self-determination for the Kashmiri people, a terminology which was very, very popular in the past. And showing the importance which India has gained in the Chinese eyes, the shared vision document between India and China in 2008, it mentioned that India and China do not pose a threat to each other. First time, India and China do not pose a threat to each other, and India-China relations should be conducted, are necessary to meet the global challenges. So they have started seeing India as a global partner to meet global challenges. So these are all the evidences which were indicative of the balanced South Asia policy. But they did not last long. This is the most important. This balanced South Asia policy was short-lived in that sense. Then the nexus comes. The real features of China-Pakistan nexus. In 2005, an important treaty, nobody is talking about the treaty nowadays. China-Pakistan Friendship and Cooperation Treaty of 2005 was signed when Wan Chao went there. It is a unique treaty of China to be concluded with a South Asian nation. No other country. This document says that, I'm not quoting from the document, but it really says that every country, both China and Pakistan, should come to the help of each other when the territorial sovereignty of each country is threatened. That means it is some kind of an alliance. As a matter of fact, the Chinese media has started using the word alliance between China and Pakistan against foreign threat. So they consider this treaty as symbolizing some kind of an alliance between China and Pakistan to face external threat. External threat to Pakistan, very, very clear. From where it can come to Pakistan. India figures naturally in that. So if India and Pakistan fight, the China is treaty bound to help Pakistan in any war. This treaty is mentioned without fail in any important occasion. Whenever any top-level VIP goes to China, for example, when Nawaz Sharif went to China, this was mentioned, 2005 treaty. When Li Keqiang went to Pakistan, he mentioned about this treaty. So the significance of the treaty, we have to analyze, and I have analyzed in one of my articles, is available, the treaty's contents and other things, and what it means. What it means is absolutely a kind of an alliance with no other country. I think with Russia they have this kind of a similar treaty. For India, it's very important to note the significance of this treaty. When I say that China, India, China, Pakistan, Nexus, etc., another evidence is appearance of articles in China, media articles and then articles by scholars, that India is practicing hegemony in South Asia, and India should respect the strategic autonomy of other countries. So they are redefining India's position in South Asia. How long is going to be implemented there in the present Sino-Indian bonhomie period, I do not know. But this is the undercurrent of their thinking, particularly at the scholars level, that India should not practice hegemony in that. Then we have seen the road and railway projects linking Pakistan and China to occupied Kashmir. Frequently, I mean, it has been talked about in a prominent manner. Everyday newspaper it carried, and the Chinese troop presence in the Gilgit and Baltistan, in the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and the corridor was talked about, the economic corridor linking Gwadar and Xinjiang, and through the Karakoram highway which is being rebuilt. So the connections through railways, oil pipelines, and so many things are going on in that. So the China-Pakistan strategic relations, they are showing a new kind of a momentum, particularly the corridor project, which is mentioned in the morning. The 2 reactors, 1,000 megawatt reactors to Pakistan by China, violating China's commitment to the NPT regime, and China violating China's commitment to the nuclear suppliers group also. From an NPT nation to a non-NPT nation is being given. We are very much bothered about. We are very much concerned about this, not because of the civil nuclear cooperation which can go on, but because of the significance of that. Because Pakistan has made terrorism as a state policy, and if any assistance in civil nuclear technology gets transformed into some kind of a weapon use, and if that facilities fall into the wrong hands, you know the consequences. Then again, I don't know. I still want a balanced South Asia policy, but they refuse visa to Indians settled in Kashmir. Our general, what is his name? I forgot. Yes, and he was denied a visa to very stable visa or something like that. So, and slowly, by agreeing for joint projects in the border with Pakistan, connection of border with Kashmir and other things, China is indicating that it may shed its neutrality on the Kashmir issue, which has so far been adopted. So far there was some kind of a neutrality, because they said, we don't take sides on the Kashmir issue, etc. I think they are tilting towards Pakistan and Kashmir issue. The economic corridor I have already said. Then when you see the China and Pakistan, they are also talking about a free trade area agreement, etc. An agreement has been signed to conclude, and the Chinese media, they describe that all the Chinese initiatives, they are aimed at linking China and Pakistan, linking the Chinese dream of Pakistan, Chinese dream of rejuvenation, with the Pakistani dream of becoming an Asian tiger. So rejuvenation and Asian tiger, they are being linked. This is what they say. And Gwadar Airport, Gwadar Port, all of you know the strategic significance of that, and the Chinese overseas Port Holdings Limited has taken over that. And that is the importance of the area, and the development there naturally is causing concern to India. Now, I want to cover why China wants Pakistan cooperation or the strategic, why China is considering Pakistan as a strategic asset. There are 4 factors which I can sort of identify. First is, of course, strategic asset to oppose India, and to limit India's rise within the confines of South Asia. So strategically, China wants to limit India's rise within the confines of South Asia. That can be done only through cooperation with Pakistan. That is their first aim, of course. The second is China's need for energy and its eye on the Central Asia and Middle East oil market, and the economic corridor and various projects which are being conducted by the 2 nations. They're all aimed at building a land route for the energy supplies in alternate to the route like the Malacca Straits, which are prone to piracy, etc. This is an important thing, and Pakistan is giving facilities. So the first is as a strategic asset, the second is Pakistan as an economic facilitator to China. Of course, markets, you have to, the trade and economy is a very important thing. The motivating factor for China is you have to develop trade, and through Pakistan as a springboard, they can develop, they can have market access to Central Asia and Middle East. And their eye is on Afghanistan, where in 2014 there is going to be a great change, it will be a game changer when the NATO withdraws. How China is going to respond to that kind of a situation. I think we are already media articles have come about the coordination between the concerned nations. An Afghan solution to the Afghanistan crisis, post-withdrawal scenario, etc. is being talked about. Even India and China have talked about middle-level talks on Afghanistan. That's a good sign, because they chose India to consult on Afghanistan. For the first time, we had held a talk not at very senior level, but at medium officers level. The fourth factor is to what should I say, to replace, to substitute the US decline in Afghanistan, and for that matter in South Asia. And because when US is going to rebalance its strength to East Asia, definitely there's going to be an impact here, and China wants to fill up that vacuum through a new South Asia role, and which they want to achieve through Pakistan friendship. With all these things, China-Pakistan nexus is clearly visible. Their arms and help, military technology, dual technology, missile, and so many, all our facts are known. So I don't want to repeat that. But one thing I wanted to tell you is, China at the same time is pinning its hope on India friendship. Indian friendship is also very, very important. The Global Times said China and Pakistan relations are developing in a broad manner, whereas China-India relations are developing in a broad manner, whereas China-Pakistan relations are growing in depth, balance and depth, broad manner and depth, kind of this thing. Time-tested friend, all-weather friends, etc. All these things, indicate their determination to follow a two-legged policy that I have already explained. So the implications for India, how India should respond. I think in the previous section it has been discussed in length. I think we can convince China that India is very important. We can leverage India's strength, particularly in the Indian Ocean, to protect Indian Ocean in order to promote our friendship with China, telling that we are important and you have to work with us. So I think in return they will get the message. Similarly, on terrorism, which is another issue which is connecting China and Pakistan, we can say India is kind of facing the same kind of terrorism, and will be able to work together with China on that, because Uyghur problem is mainly created by the Muslims from across the border, particularly in Pakistan. So any Indian overtures, I think, will be properly understood by the Chinese side. So these are the main things. Of course, our diplomatic levels, we can do quite a lot, and we can
build our alliances with all the other partners, particularly in East Asia, and other Asia, etc., Vietnam, Philippines, Japan, etc., that to bolster support to India's problems with solving India's problems with China, and this kind of cooperation, particularly some kind of a close friendship with those countries which are equally concerned with China's assertiveness. That also is going to be very, very helpful for us. I think the government is already doing it. And with that, I will stop my talk, and I'll be happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. Well, since time is very limited now, it's only about 30 minutes we have for this session. So I'll request the next speaker to take about 10 to 15 minutes. At least we have 15 minutes for discussion. And I'll also request you to cover a bit whether Tibet is a factor of China's South Asia policy.
My job is simplified, so I will not even spend more than 10 minutes on this. Three levels I would like to discuss. One, at the global level, the Chinese position. Second, at the South Asian level, and thirdly, at the individual countries, South Asian countries level. One, we have seen recently that in June there was an informal meeting between President Obama and President Xi Jinping in California, and Xi Jinping suggested a new type of major country relations, quote unquote, has been suggested. This was repeated by in the discussion between Xi Jinping and Obama, there was a non-confrontation, non-conflict situation has been suggested, and a win-win cooperation. Now, the State Councillor of China, who was the previous foreign minister, and State Councillor position is slightly higher than a foreign minister in China. The State Councillor Yang Jiechi had circulated a report called Innovation in Chinese Diplomatic Theory and Practice in August this year. After the June meeting between Obama and Xi Jinping, there was the second major document in the Chinese foreign policy construct on the innovation. He also spoke about the new type of major country relations. The Chinese don't use the word major power, but they use the word major country. Third, Wang Yi, the current foreign minister, made a statement in Brookings Institution where he essentially mentioned about the new type of major country relations. So the theme last 6 months had been that China is emphasizing on the new type of major country relations. So let's look at the concept and situate the South Asia in this overall construct. Now, the Chinese divide the current global configuration into three main types. One is the traditional powers or traditional countries who are wielding global power, including the United States. They also include the US allies like Japan, European Union, and so on and so forth in this. Secondly, they categorize regional powers, which include now France, UK, and Indonesia and other countries. A third category of powers the Chinese use is the emerging countries or emerging economies they call, and these include basically the BRICS countries, and Chinese themselves also use they categorize themselves as an emerging country rather than as a global power or a regional power or a traditional power. Within this configuration, they equate their position with India overall, but there is a huge gap in terms of responses on how they respond towards India. These three traditional power, regional power, and emerging powers or emerging countries is useful for our narrative on the overall South Asian context. In none of these, of course, the new type of major country relations, the Chinese documents hardly refer to, or actually there is no reference to India at all in the three major documents released so far. So that is quite clear, although within the emerging powers, as part of the narrative, we find India taking a position. So when Dr. Manmohan Singh lands in Beijing tomorrow afternoon, he will find that there has been a substantial change in the Chinese foreign policy, and he has to respond based on that. India hardly figures in the new type of major country relations. Number two, within South Asia, the Chinese have 5 perspectives or phenomena where they address the South Asian issue. One is through the rise of China itself. Rise of China today needs a lot of raw materials. Xi Jinping, for instance, 3 months ago announced that China is going to import $10 trillion worth of raw materials in the next 10 years' time. And China is going to export $500 billion. So when Dr. Manmohan Singh tomorrow addresses the 5 industrial parks, we will see some Chinese investment in UP, Karnataka, AP, Gujarat, and other states, 5 states in all. Some of that $500 billion will trickle down into India as well, because the other South Asian countries are, according to the Chinese description, are part of the arc of destabilization, meaning that the situation is bad in Pakistan, Nepal, even Sri Lanka. So the capital exports to these countries would be problematic from the Chinese point of view, which means that the rise of China, number one, in terms of export of capital, in terms of import of raw materials, number 3, in terms of also tourism. Over 100 million Chinese are going to visit in the next 10 years' time, from the current level of 40 million Chinese, which means last year we had 1 lakh Chinese visiting India, very few to Pakistan and other places, because there is a problem with human security, the security of the visitors, because there have been some cases of Chinese being arrested, killed, blown up in Afghanistan, in Pakistan and other places. So there has been some concern related to tourism in these areas. Nevertheless, we will see some of this 100 million also trickling down to India, and this is the reason why we have the visa related issues coming up in the last 2 years. Of course, the Cabinet Committee on Security a couple of days ago did not clear up the visa issue, which means we will have some it's only the Supreme Court of India which had put some restrictions on this now. Otherwise, we could have had a substantial export of raw materials to China. From Pakistan as well, it is the raw materials. The copper mines in Baluchistan and the Ainak mines in Afghanistan are some of the aspects of mining in these South Asian countries. So the rise of China is one major factor, and which is reflected also in the second aspect of China's policy towards South Asia, which is the Western Development Campaign. Now, last 3 5-year plans, 9th 5-year plan onwards, 9th, 10th, 11th, and the current 12th 5-year plans, China has been investing heavily in the infrastructure projects in 16 provinces western towards China. These 16 provinces have substantially seen investments in the energy pipelines from Xinjiang to Shanghai, connected to Kazakhstan, and henceforth towards Turkmenistan. We have also the Tibet Railway, we have also the airfield construction or the fiber optics, which was mentioned in a previous session. Now, the Western Development Campaign basically is to connect between Han China with that of the neighboring countries. Geopolitically, this is to secure China from the ethnic minorities disturbances, because the infrastructure projects will connect to the periphery. From there, China will be able to mobilize in terms of stability and so on and so forth. So Western Development Campaign is very useful for China towards the South Asian policy, because most of the Western development areas are connected to South Asian region. India, Nepal, Myanmar, Bhutan, Pakistan, Afghanistan are the ones which are going to be connected through the Western Development Campaign. And so we have seen that the infrastructure projects, including the proposed railway line to Lumbini and the proposed railway line through Gilgit and Baltistan up to Godar. Then we have also the other Karakoram highway expansion and hydroelectricity projects in Gilgit and Baltistan and other areas. These will be the main focus of the construction activity that China is undertaking. Obviously, if you have a construction activity, you have to have stability, you have to have protection for these, and so you have the PAPF or the non-combat troops currently providing security for these projects. So we see the Western Development Campaign as overall response to the South Asian context. The third main aspect is the nuclear balancing, which was referred to, so I will skip this aspect. But you may have observed that about a week ago, China had officially announced about the Chashma 3, Chashma 4 projects of sending nuclear reactors and technologies to building these nuclear power plants in Chashma, which makes sense for the Chinese after the 123 agreement between US and India was signed in 2006 and cleared by the IAEA and NSG in 2008. And China's position at that point of time was that there should not be any discrimination, meaning thereby that Pakistan should also get similar waiver from the international community. So the nuclear balancing we have clearly seen in this aspect, but also the concern about stability in the region. And this is where, as Mr. Rajan had mentioned, the issue of Xinjiang comes up, and the issue of the government in exile also comes up for China, on the Tibetan factor. The fourth main response of China towards South Asia is how to respond towards the rise of India. Will China balance India? Will China marginalize India? Will China contain India? Will China engage India? Those are the debates that are happening, although balance of power is the dominant theme in the Chinese thinking process towards this, but there is also a streak of thought within the Chinese foreign policy thinking that engagement is beneficial to China. Engagement with India is beneficial to China. In trade, in multilateralism, where India and China are working together on Syria, for instance, on Libya, Egypt, or on climate change proposals, which will be reiterated tomorrow in a joint statement between India and China. Multilateral issues in the SEO, in SARC summit, in East Asian Summit, these all will be reiterated tomorrow in the joint statement. So there is a strong thinking that it has to be a different kind of animal, not simply balancing India but also engaging India, which includes trade, which includes investments, which includes a host of other things. The fifth response of China towards South Asia is most important for China is the Indian Ocean region. How to respond to the Indian Navy's perceived challenge in the Indian Ocean region. So we have had some responses of Gwadar, Hambantota and so on. But this is not a complete package so far. We have not seen that package. But what we are seeing is China is contesting the US in the Indian Ocean region. As you know, Digo Garcia is the major US outpost in the Indian Ocean region. Indira Gandhi wanted to contest this. She could not in the 70s. We now have US-India kind of cooperation as part of the Malabar exercises, and so on and so forth. Today, China is contesting the US position in the Indian Ocean region. We will see China suggesting two various mechanisms towards India. Search and rescue operations, maritime cooperation, these are being discussed as of now, and some meetings have already taken place in this regard. But this is the major point of view that China will approach India on the Indian Ocean region. The Chinese have not forgotten what the Indian Navy chief had then said, that this is not a force by force level contest between India and China in the Indian Ocean region, meaning thereby that there is an opening given by the Indian Navy in this regard, despite the concerns about the so-called string of pearls. So these are 5 major areas of Chinese attention towards the South Asian region. But the crux obviously is on Tibet, on Xinjiang, which is what the chair had asked me to reflect on. China got what it wanted on the Tibet issue from India, which is to acknowledge that Tibet is part of China. In 1954, it was mentioned, it was reiterated in 1988, it was reiterated in 2003 by Vajpayee when he visited China in June that year. What China did not get out of India in terms of Tibet is that India did not declare Tibet is an inalienable portion of China. India did not declare that Tibet is a historical part of China. It is only a part of China from 1954, not prior to that, not before that. China also did not, India also did not follow what the Nepalese government had followed on Tibet, which is to hand over the Tibetan refugees physically to the PAPF, People's Armed Police Force. So these have not been done by India for various reasons. So the pressure is on in terms of the 3 main aspects of this: inalienability, historical part of China, and third, physical safety of the Tibetan diaspora. Will Tibet be part of the conflict between India and China? Indeed, there is, because the Trans-Himalayan region is composed of all Tibetans and the indigenous people in India, the Lepchas, the Bhutias, all indigenous people living in this area. They have aspirations, they have with Western Development Campaign, China is knocking at the Indian doors. Basically, China is puncturing the Himalayas through the road construction, railway construction, and a host of other infrastructure projects. So India will have to respond to it. India so far had blocked all these in terms of the high-speed railway proposal, in terms of, as somebody mentioned, the Nathula being opened up in terms of the railway projects and roadway projects into West Bengal. But sooner than later, India needs to respond to this, and the pressure is on. And so the Tibet factor will be viewed from an economic point of view, from a trans-Himalayan security point of view, from the point of view of demographics, from the point of view of military security as well, which is what India is doing as part of the recent revamping of the military structures. For instance, the Cabinet Committee on Security had sanctioned the strike corps formation, which will take the war into China. The function of a strike corps is offensive. It's not defensive, defending the borders. It is to take the war into a different plane. So since this has been sanctioned, the dynamics are changing. Now we have also seen the photographs of C-130Js flying into DBO, which is just about 3 kilometers from the line of actual control. So it means that there is some, of course this will be put forward tomorrow in front of Dr. Manmohan Singh. But as Mr. A.K. Anthony had mentioned in the Commanders Conference in June, the infrastructure projects will continue in Ladakh and elsewhere in Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. He also mentioned in this Commanders Conference that the advanced landing grounds will be revamped and new air missions will be carried out. Thirdly, there is the there is the funding and military, beefing up. So those are broadly the issues related to Tibet. I will skip the main South Asian countries: Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Maldives. But just to suggest that actually China is not feeling very happy with these countries. A $12 billion investment in Pakistan by Kinko company has been removed about a year ago. The 26,000 Chinese who live in Pakistan, most of them travel by armored personnel carriers. Most of the Chinese, fortunately, in India go by different vehicles and so on, but in Pakistan it's a different problem. In Afghanistan there are some problems as well. Recent killing of the private Chinese nationals there had indicated too. With Nepal, there is of course the turbulence there. Prachanda was the first person to meet Xi Jinping after he became president in March this year, and Bangladesh is also the first country where Xi Jinping had visited as vice president. He did not visit any South Asian countries as vice president, and he did not mention any date so far for India as well, which indicates that he emphasizes more on Bangladesh, Nepal, and so on and so forth. With Sri Lanka, similar problems. There are 33,000 Chinese in Sri Lanka in different construction activities and so on. But still there is a problem with the kind of investments and overall. In Maldives, recently the Chinese have opened up their embassy, yet the intensifying democratization in Maldives is a major ideological problem for China. In Bhutan, we had the 21st border negotiations took place in August this year. But they do not have diplomatic relations so far. So broadly, I would conclude by saying that out of all the South Asian countries, China feels very safe, lucrative in terms of the Indian composition, but with Pakistan and other countries, it views from a balancing perspective. So let me stop here.
Thank you very much. I think both the speakers have covered a very large areas. I think both the speakers linked the whole issues of China's South Asia policy to China's own internal problem. Of course, Mr. Rajan talked about the assertion part of the South Asia policy linking with the Chinese own internal problem, but Dr. Kondapalli talked about engagement and the balancing aspects of South Asia policy. But certainly both the speakers mentioned that India is not mentioned in their major documents, and they do not traditionally consider India to be a major threat to China. But certainly I think India is one of the weakest link in the whole policy. Traditionally they have very easily boxed in India within South Asia through encirclement policy or whatever, string of pearls policy. But I think the US factor, something which both the speakers have not touched, the Indo-US, the nuclear deal and the defense agreement issues have given a different dimension to the China's India policy or South Asia policy. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions on this. And what I see today, I mean, every day China is either asserting or engaging. In the last 1 week itself, the EU has allowed a NATO member, Turkey, to allow the Chinese to participate in a nuclear plant in Turkey, which is a NATO country. And this morning, if you read Times of India, it says that the United States has removed the ban of Chinese participation in NASA conference. Now, every week you have different things coming up, how the Chinese participation at the international, beyond Asia, is happening at a rapid pace. I think I'll invite questions from the audience to the speakers. For the Q&A session. Yes, yes, please.
Sir, whenever any Chinese dignitary, big dignitary is coming into India, or our dignitary is going to visit, there is something which is extremely bad for the national interest of India. Why it is happening? It is happening deliberately, or it is default? What is the reality?
So I had a question which was about the Chinese incursions in DRO and other such places. You mentioned, so Mr. Kondapalli mentioned that China wishes to engage with India in terms of trade and various other sectors. Then what is the exact reason for these incursions at this point of time?
Okay, one more question and then. Anybody? Okay, I'll request Dr. Kondapalli to respond to this.
That the any bilateral relations are part of the power relations, depending on the each one's level. In that Chinese today generally look at every country from the comprehensive national strength perspective. India's position according to them is at 9 in a 1 to 10 scale, while China is at about 6 in the 1 to 10 scale, with the US at the head of the table in the CNP category. So most of these visits also are reflective of that. But please also remember that when Dr. Manmohan Singh visits Beijing, he is visiting Beijing after 6 years. January 2008 was the last visit by Dr. Manmohan Singh. He did not visit, although there was an agreement between the two foreign ministries that there will be a summit level meetings between presidents, prime ministers, as well as foreign ministers. So this has not been implemented by India, where we have the Chinese have gone away from the protocol. Wen Jiabao came in 2010 December. It was the turn of the Indian Prime Minister to go to Beijing, but it was Li Keqiang who again visited India. So which means that we can suggest that the bilateral visits here, there was an anomaly in terms of. But overall, we have seen that the bilateral relations are a function of power in the international system. And also the dynamics, local dynamics. If they want to enhance certain objectives they have in mind, so they visit. In this case, if this is an abstract explanation, in this case, we have seen most of the Chinese prime ministers or presidents who visited India, invariably the next day they visited Islamabad. Most of the visits so far have been like this. It was in 1996 with Jiang Zemin when he visited New Delhi, he immediately went to Islamabad. Before that, Li Peng had done the same thing as premier of the State Council. Then we have Hu Jintao's visit in 2006, Wen Jiabao's visit a year before, 2005, also visiting Islamabad. Then we have Wen Jiabao's visit again in 2010, he visited Delhi and then Islamabad. Then we have recently in May Li Keqiang's visit, followed by Islamabad, then Germany, Switzerland. So we have seen a pattern where the Chinese wanted to save some fuel by combining all these trips. I think India is also learning the same thing by, if you look at carefully recent visits, after Li Keqiang's visit in May, within a week or so, Dr. Manmohan Singh visited Tokyo and then Thailand and so on. If you look at the recent visit, it was to Beijing tomorrow. It is preceded by first Washington DC, then to Moscow and then to Beijing. So I think Indian prime ministers are learning from the Chinese side on the visits as a whole. On the incursions, the politically correct word is since there is no treaty between India and China on the border, It's not an incursion, it is a transgression. Because there is no treaty on the territorial dispute. So why are transgressions happening? Again, the official explanation is that the line of actual control is not defined, demarcated, delimited, and hence you have the phenomena called transgressions, where the border patrols, imagine at 4,000 meters above sea level and minus 30, minus 40 degrees centigrade, the border patrols do intrude into the other side, others perceived line. It can happen. So these are unintentional. But we could also have intentional transgressions to say that this land belongs to me. The border patrols will insist that that land belongs to them, and so we have transgressions. Well, on an average, we have about roughly 3-digit number transgressions every year between the two. To be fair, actually, it's not just the Chinese who do the transgression. Indian patrols also transgress the Chinese perceived line of actual control. So to be objective, both do, because the terrain is problematic. And then there is also the factor of power relations. One wants to impose the will of the will on the other, so we have transgressions on that count. Now, to address this, we have flag meetings, we have border personnel meetings decided during Chiang Zemin's visit in '96. Now that is not functioning, as the Depsang Bulge incident had indicated in April 15th to May 6th incident this year. So we now have tomorrow, most possibly, the BDCA will be signed. My hunch is this is only an incremental increase in the 96 CBMs and 2005 proposals. Nothing spectacular with BDCA. We can still have a Depsang Bulge incident, maybe after the Prime Minister comes back home, or even before. You can never know, because the incident as such in Depsang Bulge happened because there is a problem in civil-military relations in China. This is one reason why Mr. Salman Khurshid and Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon said that Chinese did not give an explanation on why this has happened. And it suggests that if the Chinese side has not given an explanation on the Depsang Bulge incident, it indicates that the strategic partnership and cooperation agreement of 2005 is not working. If there is a strategic partnership agreement, both sides will open up their heart and minds to tell the other side why I intruded into your house. So that has not happened, which means that there is a limitation in the strategic partnership. So the transgressions are linked to this.
Any more questions? So, okay, now I think time is also up. Well, I'll also, I will not take too much time after 2 billion presentation by 2 paper presenters. Well, we really do not know the future or the eventual characteristics of China's South Asia policy. But since we have both India and perhaps Bhutan also have an unsettled border with China, I think in China's South Asia policy is going to be a very, very complicated one, even in the future. I think that eventually Bhutan will settle its border with China, but with India, I think things are going to be a little bit more complicated in the post-14 Dalai Lama situation. This is what I feel, and I stayed for 4 months at the in the border area in the last since June to September, and I do not think that things are going to be very, very good for India-China relations along the border. And so I think overall China's South Asia policy will hinge on the Sino-Indian relationship, and within that I think the Chinese will play the other games. But whether you call it Chinese assertiveness or Indian failure, it's very, very difficult to come to any conclusion. I think I'll end with that.
Thank you. I think we have Jigme Yeshe Lama, Lobzang Yangso, Sewang Mingyur, Dolma Sering, and Tenzin Ladun. As you see, this is a session for Gen Next in a way. You just heard their guru, Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, elaborating the profiles of China's strategy towards South Asia. This session is dedicated to discuss Tibet as a factor in international relations. We are very fortunate that the responsibility of Indian intellectuals to maintain some kind of a continuous dialogue about Tibet, which was shouldered by giants like Professor M.L.Sondhi ji, with so many eminent public intellectuals of his time, is continuing with the help of M.L.Sondhi Institute for Asia Pacific Affairs and Tibet Parliamentary Policy and Research Center. It would have been great moment of gratification for Professor Sondhi that his school, the School of International Studies of Jawaharlal Nehru University, is now hosting a very bright young team of Tibetan scholars, most of whom have not seen Tibet personally, but have internalized the dream of their culture, civilization, society, and nation, and have also internalized the values of justice and freedom and fraternity and compassion. The order for the session is that we'll have the first paper by Jigme Yeshe Lama on China's political power, policies and protests in Tibet. To facilitate discussions, it will be good that each one of you is taking 15 minutes, though you have very large canvas to cover. So let's try to be fair with the audience and start with the first presentation, yeah?
Thank you, Chair, and I thank the organizers for inviting all of us to make presentations here on a very important topic, a topic which is very near and dear to each and every one of us on Tibet. I know it's the afternoon session, so please bear with all of us, especially after that very hearty lunch and the nice tea that everyone had. My topic for today's presentation is on China's political power, policies and protests in Tibet, where I'll be focusing mostly on the political power, that is on the political institutions, and also touch slightly upon the policies and protests that are taking place inside Tibet. The Tibetan areas were incorporated into the modern nation state of China with the signing of the 17-point agreement between the then government in Lhasa, the Tibetan government, and Beijing. This diplomatic act came about only after the military victory over the Tibetans in the Battle of Chamdo by the 18th Route Army of the Southwest Military Bureau. When the Chinese arrived, they encountered a traditional governing setup which had been present since the 17th century, which derived its legitimacy primarily from primordial notions of culture, religion, and traditions, where religion and politics were strongly enmeshed. Till 1959, this traditional setup in the Tibetan areas west of the Drichu was maintained, ending however with the ill-fated revolt led by the Tibetans on 10th March 1959. Internationally, during that period, a wave of decolonization was underway and numerous new nation states were born, such as the PRC as well as India. It is this project of a nation state, a polite term for the cultural and ideological homogenization of a country's population, which became one of the implicit goals of the modern state. Tibet can be seen as one of the victims of this modernist project and continues to be under modern-day China. Regarding the traditional political institutions, Tibet pre-1951 was under an administrative setup of Chosin Yiden, which loosely translates as religion and politics joined together. From 1642, with the 5th Dalai Lama becoming the ruler of Tibet and unifying the land, the Dalai Lamas and the Ganden Podrang government became the legitimate sovereign over the lands till the coming of the Chinese. However, it was not a modern nation state in the Westphalian sense, but was based on primordial elements which had permeated into areas where the Dalai Lama had no actual political authority. This is seen in the regions of Kham and Amdo, where numerous principalities as well as chieftains were present, having their own sense of sovereignty, but had strong cultural ties with Lhasa. They considered themselves to be a part of the Tibetan cultural world, and Lhasa was the cultural center for a very long period of time. Also, a major demand laid by the Dalai Lama, especially after 59, which has been rejected by Beijing, is inclusion of these historic areas as one unified Tibet under a single administrative autonomous unit. This is where, to a greater extent, the project of the modern-day nation-state of the PRC fails to comprehend and also faces the most stiff resistance which was seen in the uprisings of 1954-56, as well as the present-day increasing protests and self-immolations which are concentrated in these historic regions. Indeed, the cultures and other primordial ties which link these regions with the rest of Tibet have begun to return to haunt the People's Republic. From 1951 till, to a certain extent, till 1965, there was a structure of power which was quite different, because during this period till 1959 it was a Tibet Working Committee which assumed much significance and became the main ruling body in Tibet, operating as a party organ behind the official administration, which was still in theory the Kashak and the traditional Tibetan government under the Dalai Lama. However, there were two working committees on Tibet then, each formed by the respective military commands which had entered Tibet. Soon, with the signing of the 17-point agreement, there was an amalgamation of these two Tibet-related committees, and till the period of the formation of the TAR in 1965, this group was disbanded. Even among the existing institutions which had remained from 1951 to 59, a hybrid entity had been created, which was a form of coexistence between the three traditional structures. There were the Kashak, the Chamdo Liberation Committee, and the Nangma Gang, or the inner circle of the Penchen Lamas Labrang in Tachilimpo. Along with certain other CCP officials, these Tibetan elites formed what is known as the Preparatory Committee for the Autonomous Region of Tibet in 1956, a quasi-governmental body which had the Dalai Lama as a former chairperson as well as the Penchen Lama as a vice chairperson. From 1966 till 1979, when Tibet with the rest of China was plunged in the throes of the Cultural Revolution, the Regional Party Committee as well as other governing structures came to a virtual standstill. It was the institution of the Revolutionary Committee in the Tibet Autonomous Region which administered the region, which was a three-way alliance between the party, the cadres, and the army. It was composed of 27 people, of whom only 4 were Tibetans, which included the aristocrat Ngabeng Awangjigmi. The structure of administration in Tibet. If you see Tibet, it has been placed under the rubric of the National Regional Autonomy System, which guarantees minority nationalities the right to administer their own national affairs. Thus, they have been granted their own autonomous regions, or are divided into a number of autonomous prefectures and counties. The TAR was established in 1965, but prior to it, the communists had already established the Tianzu, or the Pari Tibet Autonomous County, in 1950. The eastern regions of Tibet, Kham and Amdo, were divided among the 4 neighboring provinces of China, Qinghai, Gansu, Sichuan, and Yunnan, and were granted autonomous prefectures and autonomous counties. The slide over here shows the number of prefectures that the TAR has, as well as further subdivided into number of counties and townships. Also, the other slide shows the number of TAPs that Sichuan and the other neighboring provinces having a Tibetan population has. For instance, in 2013, a new county was created in the Nakshu prefecture, which was previously under the Nima county, which is termed as the Shuanghu county. What we see in China is that administrative divisions have been altered, taking in the demands of the of development, especially economic development, which was seen in 2002-2003 when the administrative jurisdiction of Lhasa was extended to the Tolling regions. Under the law given to national minorities, the right to manage their own affairs have been granted, which have been termed by many critics as being only on paper. The notion of autonomy is not a departure from the top-down approach which is implemented by the Chinese leadership. Rather, it is defined by the perceived need to adopt policies formulated by the center to local characteristics, implementing it in a non-Chinese context. The Tibetan regions have been administratively designed on lines of the other provinces, where there is the People's Congress at the three levels, the People's Government as well as the judiciary. Also, what is important is the People's Congress in the TAR is defined as a supreme organ of the government and invested with powers to modify national laws, enact local legislation, as well as appoint government and judicial officials. The members are elected by the general population, and the chair of the local People's Congress has to be from the same ethnic community as deemed by the constitution, which is shown by the following slide, where almost all the chairmen of the People's Congress from 65 onwards are all Tibetans, and they to a certain extent along with the other members were supposed to have been directly elected, which according to the official statistics shows that in 2002 the turnout was around 93.09%, which had increased to 96.4% in 2007. Also, the official statistics reveals that the TAR People's Congress had enacted around 220 local or separate regulations. Still, to much of the criticisms which are heard towards the People's Congress is that it is simply seen as a rubber stamp for the laws that are implemented in Beijing. Also, the Chinese constitution also mandates that the heads of the local autonomous region has to be from the ethnic community itself, that is the governor, which the following slide shows, where from 1965 till present 2013, all of the present governors or the governors of the regional government in Tibet are all Tibetan. Also, an important body with regard to the Tibetan areas of China, through which the CCP tries to derive legitimacy, is the CPPCC, the Chinese People Political Consultative Conference. It is also present in almost all the administrative levels of the PRC and is seen as an important political consultative organization that plays a patriotic united front role. It does not have any legal standing in the Chinese constitution, but exists as a secondary institution established by the CCP. It is mostly constituted of a number of ethnic personalities as its members, people who are ideologically different from the CCP, but has been dubbed as a mere ceremonial organ, exhausted by rubber stamping party policies. While it is true that the appointment of a member is a gift solely in the hands of the party, it is the representation of the non-party members and especially the elites from the national minorities which matter, as it displays a sign of seeking legitimacy through continuity. In the early years, the CPPCC had important propaganda work to carry out for the CCP, while at present it acts as a disseminator of party policy to the public. While it has been termed as a highly passive body, nonetheless, members of this body has been seen to be quite assertive and make hostile criticisms against the policies of the government. In 2013, the 12th CPPCC National Committee saw the inclusion of the Chinese Panchen Lama, the 12th Samding Doji Phagmo, and the Dubkang Thupden Khedup, as well as the 7th Rating Rumbuche became a member of the regional CPPCC. These appointments can be seen in terms of China's move to control the future of the Dalai Lama's reincarnation, as all the appointed ones are high-ranking reincarnates and are deemed to have a role in the coming days. Furthermore, a focus on Tibet is seen by the present-day Politburo member and chairman of the CPPCC, Yu Zhangsheng, who in 2012-2013 made several visits to the Tibetan regions, emphasizing on development and the need to tackle separatism. Also, another important organ which has much repercussions on China's Tibet policy is that of the United Front Work Department, which is an organ of the CCP which plays an advisory role in the decision-making structures of the state. Furthermore, it creates alliances with non-communist patriotic individuals and groups. The United Front's significance to Tibet lies in the fact that it participates in the negotiations with the envoys of the Dalai Lama. Another important institution that has been created with regard to policies governing the Tibetan regions is the Tibet Work Forum, where from 1980 onwards there have been five work forums on Tibet, which have deliberated much upon Tibet's socio-economic development. The first two work forums brought about liberal policies, while from the third work forum it emphasized on large-scale development in Tibet and also brought a spate of hardline policies, which coincided with the coming in of the hardliner party secretary Chen Guoyuan. The Tibet work forums are modes which brings about over-centralization in China's policies in Tibet, which to a certain extent is a major problem, as there is the absence of a creation of an indigenous administrative system in Tibet, which is deemed as one of the major lacuna of China's policies in Tibet. Now, with regard to the most important organ, that is the or the body which matters the most in China as well as in Tibet is that of the Chinese Communist Party, because it is the Chinese Communist Party where true power really lies. What is also significant is that in Chinese politics, the notion of power and position is contradictory, as a high position does not guarantee one with absolute power and vice versa. This is much evident in the case of Tibet, where the party secretary remains the single most powerful figure in Tibet, with no ethnic Tibetan ever becoming a party secretary. It is the post of the deputy party secretaries that the Tibetans have been elevated to. While most of the administrative and government posts have been or are held by Tibetans, they in effect don't have any power or are all subordinate to the party secretary. The selection process of the party secretary is highly secretive and is done by the Central Committee in Beijing. Hu Yaobang, the liberal leader who had heralded reforms in the 1980s in Tibet, wanted a Tibetan to be the first party secretary in the TAR and had hoped for Phunzo Wangel, the Tibetan communist, to be the first. This did not materialize, as the liberal policies were soon curbed and Hu Yaobang was subsequently removed from office. The following slide shows the names of the different party secretaries that have served in Tibet from 1965 till present. Till 1985, we see that most of the first party secretaries were all veteran military cadres who belonged to the 18th Route Army of the Southeast Military Command, which changed from 1985 onwards with the coming in of Wu Qinghua, an ethnic national from the Yi nationality. Also, what we see is the present standing committee of the Tibet Autonomous Region, CCP, has 7 Han and 6 Tibetans, and their names have been given in the following slide. Also, another important institution through which much control is exercised over Tibet are the grassroots institution of the PRC in Tibet, which are the democratic management committees in monasteries, the neighborhood committees, and the village committees. The following slide mentions about the number of neighborhood committees and village committees in the Tibetan populated area, starting from the TAR. Also, what is important is in 2012, around 20,000 cadres were stationed in the rural areas of Tibet who were manning the village committees, because much of the population of Tibet are present in the rural areas. And what we see is that in 2008, with the pan-Tibetan protests, it had also spread across the rural pastoral areas, and we also see numerous incidents of self-immolations occurring in these regions. Therefore, there is an emphasis on stability with the stationing of these cadres. The following slide shows China's policies in Tibet briefly, which consist of different phases. The first phase, from 51 to 60, can be termed as a period of status quo, not altering the then existing institutions. From 1960 onwards, we have a land redistribution and a policy of democratic reforms. Also in 62, we see the socialist education movement, which were all linked to a steady integration or assimilation of Tibet into the PRC. From 66 till 79 was a disastrous cultural revolution. Also from 1980 till 90, there was a revision of the earlier policies, and a liberal policy were implemented, such as household responsibility system, indigenization of the cadre force as well as of the economy, and the freedom to practice religion. However, from 1990 onwards, after the uprisings that happened in Lhasa in 1980s, the late 80s, we see the imposition of a hardline policy, especially towards Tibetan culture and religion. What we also see is, during this particular period, we see the Western Development Campaign from 2000 onwards, where there has been the imposition of a massive infrastructural development, urbanization, as well as the sedentarization of nomads, which are creating much tension in these regions, which to a certain extent had also led to the 2008 uprisings. In conclusion, what we generally see is that the Chinese state in the Tibetan regions is seen to be lacking the hegemonic consensus, which is much required for the consolidation of power. This is also due to the presence of residual elements of Tibetan authority and sovereignty, the historical baggage which I had mentioned earlier, which is prevalent in Tibet and which limits China's hegemonic process. The Gramscian notion of historical sedimentation is apt in understanding this lack of authority of the Chinese state in the region, which the People's Republic supplements with the enforcement of coercive power and politics. This is seen to be leading to a situation where China's political system is ever increasing in the Tibetan regions, but which in itself is a major cause of its retrenchment in Tibet, thus contributing to the waning of Chinese power. Therefore, in conclusion, to a certain extent, the Chinese state has not been able to understand what the Tibetans really want. But still, it is not a single monolith, because there are numerous instances where public spaces have been opened inside Tibet where negotiations have taken place. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this macro view in such a condensed and short form, but also with so many fine details, including names of some of the people and their ethnic background. Jigme Yeshe Lama is currently a PhD student, so you can expect much more to come from him in very near future when his thesis is over. We should be another year or two.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The next speaker is Lobsang Yagso, who is a PhD candidate again in Chinese Studies at Center for East Asian Studies in JNU. He has a BA in Literature, English Literature, and MA in International Studies from Stella Maris College, Chennai. He participated in the Fletcher Summer Institute for the Advanced Study on Nonviolent Conflict at Tufts, Medford, very recently. May I call upon him to speak about China's environmental policies and problems in Tibet. For us in the audience, it will be important to keep track of the questions which have emerged with the previous presentation and will be emerging in the next presentations, so that when all the 5 presentations are over, 15 minutes each, we can get good 15 minutes for a very brief but meaningful question answer session also. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to give a rough outline of my presentation. I would be speaking on the Tibetan plateau and the relationship between the Buddhism and the traditional environmental protection in Tibet. And thirdly, some of the environmental problems in Tibet, and then I would like to conclude at the end. Tibetan plateau has been referred as the roof of the world. But recently, Tibet has been referred as the third pole because it holds the third largest perennial ice mass on the planet after North Pole and South Pole. And there are around 46,000 glaciers on the Tibetan plateau. And Tibet has also referred as Asia's water tower, and it has a source of Asia's 10 major rivers to 11 countries, and sustains the life of 47% of world population and 85% of Asia's population. According to the Department of Information and International Relations of CT, Central Tibetan Administration, states that Tibet was ecological stable before the Chinese occupation, and historically both Buddhism and Tibetan government has promoted environmental protection through religious teaching as well as by formal ethics called tzatzik. And in 17th century, 1642, the fifth Dalai Lama Lobsang Gyatso has released a decree for the protection of animals and the environment. In Tibetan, it is called Relung Tzatzik. And in 1901, the 13th Dalai Lama has also issued a decree on wildlife conservation, where it has told people to protect wildlife and environment conservation. And with the concept of Buddhist interconnection and interdependence has also influenced the Tibetan people to protect and preserve Tibetan environment. And the third point would be Tibetan, especially Buddhism, has a belief on deities, and the mountains and the rivers are believed to be the dwelling places of gods which protect Tibet, and especially the Mount Everest, Amaching and Mount Kailash are regarded as the abodes of the 12 female deities. So thus it proves that traditional Tibetans are said to have the same ecological awareness of that developed by the Western scientific thought. Tibetan environment has been protected before the Chinese occupation, and there are other 3 reasons: the remoteness of and inaccessibility, sparse population, and slow economic development. These issues have also led environmental protection in Tibet. However, with the coming of China in Tibet, China has introduced various development policies, and the Chinese name for the Tibet is Xinjiang, and which is referred as and which can be translated as Western Treasure Land. And then in 2001, the Western Development Program has introduced, and the previous scholars have gave a detailed discussions on that. But I would be studying the relationship between the development policies inside Tibet and its impact on the Tibetan environment. China has 40% of total land which is covered with grassland, and where majority of the land are found in only a few provinces or the autonomous regions such as Inner Mongolia, Xinjiang, Tibet and Qinghai. And there are 60% of Tibet's land mass is open grassland, but 90% of Tibet's grassland shows deterioration. And thus China in 2003, the state government, the state council has issued a white paper on environment improvement and environmental protection in Tibet, and they have discussed about the grassland degradation inside Tibet, and introduced various grassland policies. The first policy would be the pastoral responsibility system in early 1990s. This pastoral responsibility system is a policy where land was privatized, and land was given to a people in the lease for 30 to 50 years. However, the land ownership remains with the state. And the major reason or the rationale behind this policies is that this would give herders the proper incentive both to better manage their land and also to become a more efficient market producer. And in 2003, the Tumu Hansrao policy was introduced, the retire livestock and restore grassland, and this has been implemented in Tibet in a very large scale, but implemented at a different level at the different provinces, and it was more forcefully implemented in Qinghai province. This policy, it's a call for removal of livestock and nomads, fencing, grassland, bans and restrictions and rotation. And we can see a picture where they put a fence on the grassland, and due to the fence, some areas become overgrazed on the grassland, and the other side of fence shows the biodiverse healthy grassland. So even though they put a fence, they allow only a small portion of the grassland for the nomads, which also cause grassland degradation. In 2009, the destocking policy was introduced in Tibet, and it was also included as a compensation for ecosystem services, and it was introduced as a reward system for the nomads for not exceeding the number of livestock according to their rangeland. And 2006, the comfortable housing program was introduced, and from the Tibetan side, it is referred as a forced resettlement of Tibetan nomads. And the Qinghai province in 2009 has released by saying that by 2014, all nomads in Qinghai provinces will be relocated in comfortable housing program. And recently Human Rights Watch has released a report by saying that 90% of the Tibetan nomadic population will be removed into the sedentary house by the end of 2013. The Chinese media, the Chinese government says that this household responsibility system has helped in the economic development of the nomads, and it has provided health care, education and infrastructure for the nomads. However, there are also negative impacts on these policies because as other scholars have mentioned that it has given a control of nomads, and it has given the state Chinese government to have open access to pastures, and they also do boost the investments, and because of the forced full resettlement of nomads on one area, it has created unemployment to the nomads, and thus they are, especially the young nomads, they are end up doing having gamblings, and they are not, as compared to the Chinese migrant, they are not skillful to get a better job. And it has also created a social clash among the Tibetan nomads, because the nomads had the ranch land has been divided among the villages, and some villages they get a grassland which has a good access of water, and other villages they get a grassland which is not very suitable for the livestock. However, there is still need of huge research on the whether these policies have degraded the grassland, or whether these policies have helped or improved the grassland. The second environmental problem on the Tibetan plateau is wildlife extinction, and wildlife extinction is causing in Tibet due to hunting and poaching exercise, and railway has been the major factor in terms of wildlife extinction, and the most vulnerable of which are the Tibetan antelope, or it is called as a chiru, and it disturbs railway disturbs the annual migration and the food pattern of the chiru, and actually chiru the Chinese have used chiru for the shantush, which is a very high quality of fabric of shawl. So this has been sell in the market in a very good high prices. That's why chiru has been smuggling in Tibet. And the third environment problem is permafrost melt. Permafrost melt is a frozen soil which has been remained as a frozen for more than 2 or more than years of, and permafrost is essential because it contains and it holds the carbon, and once the permafrost get degraded, then it releases the carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. So thus, but the melting of permafrost is caused by climate change and as well as engineering activity. And fourth environment issues is melting of glaciers, and here we have seen a photo of Rongbuk glacier, and this photo has been taken in 2007, and they have compared the photo which has taken in 1921, and the scientists have came to know that there has been a great glacier melt inside Tibet. And water pollution is a major problem both inside Tibet and in China, and in rural China more than 340 million rural Chinese does not have access to clean drinking water, and water pollutions are caused mainly by the mining, and because while doing the mining they release lots of gas, and which has caused mining, and due to this there are some villages inside Tibet which is also referred as a cancer village, and it has caused social unrest and anti-mining protest. And though there are lots of protests inside Tibet, but there are specifically environment protests are happening inside Tibet, and it has caused disturbance, and all these water mega projects have also impact on the water and cause a displacement of the people. Deforestation has been also happened in Tibet, and timber extraction is the major event that is happening in Tibet, and and the Xinhua News of China has released that from 1959 to 1985, 46% of Tibet's forest has been destroyed with the value of US dollar 54 billion. And China also acknowledged that Tibet has one of the largest areas in forest in China. The sixth major environment problem is desertification, and in 2009 Xinhua has released a paper saying that desertification is worsening in Tibet, and 18% of Tibet's land was desertified land, and 98,000 acres are expanding each year. The causes of desertification in Tibet are driven by the deforestation, overgrazing and mining, and a railway also threatens the desert, causes desertification in Tibet. And then while though environment issue has been discussed in the international media, but then Tibetans inside Tibet has also responded on the Chinese development policies and all these environment problems. And Yushu County in Qinghai has formed environmental organization called Environmentalist in the Snow by the Tibetan locals. They though the environmental NGOs are not very active, or they cannot form a very large environment NGOs in Tibet, but they are small local environmental NGOs which try to preserve the Tibetan ecology. And in Chuji County, the Friends of Wild Yak Association was formed, and they are individuals like Rinchen Samru Kunga Tsaya and Doje